This is Roberta Foster, and welcome to today's edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word. Today I welcome Stu Crum to Author's Corner. He's written the book Aim for the Uprights, which is published by Stu Crum Publishing Company, and he'll tell you more about how to find the book at the end of the program. Let me tell you a little bit about Stu. His college football heroics put him on the national radar as a model student athlete. Identified as a winner with a natural gift for leadership, he played professionally in the NFL, but made his name wrangling deals with the likes of other companies and professionals for Texaco, Shell Oil, Jiffy Lube, and Bridgestone. But we're talking to Stu today because he is also a voice for Christians who strive to incorporate their faith in their professional life. Thank you so much for being with us today, Stu.
I'm so thrilled to be here and love talking about my faith in Jesus.
Amen. Well, you know, some people say it's difficult to be a business leader and still maintain our ethics and faith in Christ and do what he wants us to do. But you have a different answer to that, don't you?
Well, you know, I do. And I learned pretty early in my career, Roberta, that if I was going to stay true to my faith, that I just couldn't compromise. And so I was challenged my first 6 months in the job. This is actually over 40 years ago. And I was put in a position that I either had to say, yes, I'm going to follow the crowd or not going to follow the crowd. And I chose not to because it would have been embarrassing to my mother, my wife, and everybody. So, yeah, I've stood pretty firm on the foundation of Christ ever since I've been in business. And I think I've proven to a lot of my peers and colleagues that, you know, you can be successful, however you define success, by standing firm in your faith.
And one of the things you talk about is the importance of intention. It's important to live intentionally for our faith, but also for our business practices. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And the book title, Aim for the Upright, was a story about football, but then I go on to finish off kind of the title is the intentional playbook for success in faith, family, and business. And I do think in every part of your life, whether it's in my case as a father, as a husband, as a businessman, and as a Christian, everything I've done, I've really been intentional about doing it. Intentional just simply means I've had a purpose in it. It hasn't been by accident. And I think because from a very young age, I learned about intentionality as an athlete. It certainly helped me as I've grown at becoming a businessman over the last 40 plus years.
And so you've been successful in business. Why write a book?
Well, that is something that I wasn't planning on doing even 2 years ago. So I'll tell you kind of a quick story around it. I had a car wash business. I've done a number of different things, run some very large companies in the United States, and I became an entrepreneur about 6 years ago and built a car wash business and sold it actually to Circle K. And when I sold the business, one of the people that I was negotiating the deal with said, Stu, we've been negotiating for 6 months, and that's talking to you. You've had really a fascinating life. You should write a book. Up until that point, I literally never had an intention of writing a book. And this is probably 2 years ago now. And so what I had done for the last 14 years that I've been an executive, been a CEO, is every week I write a note to my organization. So when I was at Bridgestone, I had 23,000 teammates. Right now, I'm an entrepreneur in a startup business. I've got 600 teammates. And they receive that note, and it's an inspirational note on something that's a topic that I think, whether it's on character or integrity or making lemonade out of lemons, whatever it is. And so I already had 150 pages written. I thought, not a bad idea to write a book. But what's interesting is he recommended I write this as a leadership book. What ended up happening is I got, 3 or 4 chapters into it, and I realized that my life is far more about business. Most of my life is about my faith and my family. And so the book went from being a business leadership book to really a business leadership book, a book on my faith, and a book on, how to be a godly father and be a godly businessman, and all those things kind of wrapped up in one. So it took on a world of its own, but it was really fun, and I'm proud of the end state of it, because I think, we glorify God through it, and clearly put a roadmap out for people that are, how do I become a Christian businessman, a Christian father, that we lay that roadmap for them.
Well, and we'll talk more about that roadmap in just a moment. I'm talking with Stu Crum about his book, Aim for the Uprights. It's published by Stu Crum Publishing Company, and you're listening to Author's Corner, and I'm Roberta Foster. So as a person picks up the book, I notice that there's very distinct features in each chapter. Why don't you share a little bit more about the content?
Yeah, so, it starts off really starting football. So let me just take 2 minutes and explain even how the title of the book came, because a lot of people can say, why Aim for the Upright? So I was very fortunate that when I was my last year of college, I went to the University of Tulsa. I was one of the top-rated place kickers in the country, and there's a very good chance I was going to be drafted into the National Football League. And 2 days for the NFL draft, the New York Giants came out and wanted to see me kick live. And so the coach from the Giants put 10 balls on the 30-yard line, which would make a 40-yard field goal. He says, Stu, I want you to kick. He says, but before you kick it, I don't want you to kick the ball through the goalpost, which is what all kickers do. And he goes, I want you to actually hit the right upright. And for football fans out there, there's a goalpost that has two right upright, or there's a right upright and a left upright. It goes 30 feet in the air. It's about 3 inches in diameter. I said, Coach, you want me to what? He says, yeah, I want you to hit the right upright. I said, well, I want to play professional football. I'll do anything you want me to do at this point. So, my snapper snapped the ball, holder put the ball down. I kicked the ball, and I actually hit the right upright. And I'm not sure who was more surprised, the coach or me, but I ended up hitting it. And then I wanted to kick 9 more, and I missed those 9. But at the very end, he said, Stu, do you know why I did that? I said, Coach, I have no idea. He says, well, we've noticed that when kids come from college to pro, they aim for the goalpost. And when you miss a little bit to the right of it or a little bit to the left of it, you can actually miss your whole field goal. What we teach in the NFL is you find something that's a real finite point right in the middle of that goalpost, and you aim for that. So if you miss a little bit right or a little bit left, you still make your 3 points. He goes on to say, Stu, you've been aiming for good in your life, but we want you to aim for great. And so that became literally from that day in my life, and I can remember it like it was yesterday, that became a metaphor for my life. Stu, don't just aim for good in everything you do. Aim for great, because if you're aiming for great, you're giving glory to God, and you're doing your best for God. So that is how the book started, or how the book title started, Aim for the Upright. And then I go on, and I talk about a lot of things in my book. I talk about, how I got into football. I talk about my wife. My wife went through cancer, and how we as a family helped her beat cancer, and now she's 18 years past her cancer. And I talk about my son, who played professional baseball, but also had an addiction problem with opioids after his 4th arm surgery. He was a pitcher, and how we worked through that as a family. And then, there's a lot of things on business, and how do you deal with making hard decisions in business and being a Christian. Matter of fact, I'm in a new CEO role right now, and I had to let go my COO just 4 days ago, and I care and I love about people. So how do you do that? How do you have compassion? You have to let somebody go. They might write the job. So it's a lot of stories, but at the end of each chapter, there's actually a message, and there's a message that you could actually study and say, okay, I've learned this from your story, and here's the message I take away from it. And 18 chapters, 18 stories, and 18 messages at the each end of that chapter.
There's a phrase that is becoming kind of popular, and it's a true phrase, and one that we all should try to accomplish. That's servant leadership. So what does that mean to you?
Servant leader, you're right. It's almost overused in the Christian community. It's almost overused, actually, in the non-Christian community, to be honest with you. What servant leadership meant to me is, whether I'm leading a team of 23,000 or a team of 600, I actually work for those people. So there's no job that's too small or too big for me. I happen to be the CEO, and that's wonderful, but it doesn't mean that I'm any better or worse than any of my teammates. And so, servant leadership to me means giving it all to your team, being second, not first, right? It's about team. There's no I in team. So it's all about the teamwork and bringing everybody on the journey with you. And I literally have written a number of weekly messages on servant leadership,
Sure.
and we could actually have an hour we could talk about it. But really, it's taking the I out of team and making sure that we're all serving each other in one organization.
And then share with us a little bit more about how you have balanced your personal ambition, family, faith, and work life. You know, you've obviously got to be a very busy man, and using the word intentional, you must be intentionally setting your schedule to be able to accomplish this. So share some more about that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I'm going to use a good example. Early on, I now have grown children. I've got 4 grandchildren, so I'm very, very blessed to be, a grandparent now. But when I was raising my children, and I was actually living overseas, my wife and I were living in New Zealand. We had an international assignment. And one thing that I loved to do early on was play golf. But golf takes about 4 hours to play golf. You get 30 minutes before you get there, an hour and you get back. It takes 5 or 6 hours. And I literally, for 25 years, gave up golf. Why? Because I didn't think I could be a great father and a great golfer at the same time, because I was working during the weeks. On the weekends, I had time, and it's either be in the golf course and do what Stu wants to do, or actually spend time with my precious children and my wife and nurturing those relationships. And, one of the things that I do talk about in the book is you've got to create priorities in your life. Is a priority being a great father, or is a priority being a great golfer? For me, my priority was being a great father. Just to carry on that thought is, I've always heard people, well, I'm going to have quality time with my family. Well, quality time doesn't come because you plan it. It comes as a result of quantity time. So you have to put the effort in, and then the quality somehow fits in there and comes all together for you. So I just made a commitment that when I wasn't working and having a commitment to my employer, whoever it was at the time, that my commitment was to my family, and I gave up personally some things that weren't really giving anything up, because I have a 32 and 34-year-old children today that we adore each other. We're very, very close knit family, and it's because we spent that time together as a family as we were growing up.
Well, in the book, you also share a story about the death of a teammate and how that impacted your faith journey. So close our time together with that story.
Yeah, so I was a freshman at University of Tulsa. I was not a Christian yet. And about 8 weeks before this teammate, Joe Sandusky, died, 2 guys from Campus Crusade for Christ knocked at my door and said, "Hey, if you died today, would you go to heaven?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a pretty good guy. I think my chances are pretty good. I think so." Well, let's fast forward, and it's the 3rd game of the season, and Joe was my deep snapper. And as a kicker, the snapper is a really important person, snapper holder. And he came down with pneumonia, and 3 days later died. And it really shook me up. I mean, it shook me up to the core. And I realized that if I did die, I wasn't sure if I'd go to heaven.
Yeah.
And so it was literally that day that I recognized that I needed, not just for fire insurance. I always say that. I didn't accept Christ for fire insurance. I realized that I needed faith, needed a relationship with Jesus, so that I could live a life that was more fulfilling than the life that I was leading that day. And that was something that brought me to a realization that I had to have a faith journey in my life.
Well, and I'm sure that one day when you get to heaven and you get to meet up with him again, that will be a wonderful time for him to realize the impact that he's had on your life. And so, well, today I'm talking with Stu Crum. He's written the book, Aim for the Uprights. And so, Stu, tell our listeners more about how they can find this book.
Well, you can go to StuCrumm.com. Very easy, StuCrum.com, and it talks about the book and a little bit about my life. Or just easier, you go on Amazon and just Google Aim for the Upright, and you can order the book. And, I do think that for people that are trying to find a path in the journey for their life and intentional living, that this book gives a lot of anecdotes and great thoughts on how to do that. So very easy to get the book. Just go to Amazon. All
right. One more time. The book is Aim for the Uprights, and it's written by Stu Crum. And we're so thankful to have received a copy of that today. And Stu, it's been a real pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you so very much for having me. You have a blessed day.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's interview or would like to hear it again, you can find it on your favorite podcast platform or through kneo.org. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join me again next time.